his last chance. The Marquis decided to agree, knowing rumors would spread that he couldn't control his daughter. But first, he needed to get out of here. Then the girl handed him a document that'd prove he was agreeing to all the terms. But the Marquis just got even angrier. He still believed Angela was weak and stupid, and wouldn't have the guts to do something like this to her own father. The Marquis figured someone put her up to it, then realized it was that maid, and was sure his daughter wouldn't have done anything without her. Also, he was dying to know how the banquet would go, and how they planned on introducing Prince Lacy to the public. Wilhelm was claiming that without his help, they'd just screw everything up, and then they'd regret it. He signed the document anyway, then left, and Sienna reported this to Angela, who praised the maid for it. But now they had to worry about the prince's banquet, and the lady said she was cool with just canceling it. She figured all she'd have to deal with then was some side-eye from people, and her dad getting pissed. That's it. As soon as the banquet got canned, rumors started flying that the little prince was nuts and couldn't be seen in public. People were also saying he was cursed by some nasty witch, and even thought Angela was going to ditch him. The noblewomen kept telling her that the longer she put off explaining things, the harder it would be to dump him later. They didn't know how to help her with the prince, and just kept asking questions, insisting that everything would be fine after. But Angela asked them, even though her kid was different, to at least be polite. She explained that her son wasn't crazy, just special, and that's when the nobles couldn't figure out why she canceled the banquet. The lady explained she was going to introduce Lacy to the world outside the palace when he was ready for it. But the noblewomen were telling her that she was shirking her duties, and that the prince wouldn't be able to claim the throne. Even knowing all the risks, Angela was still going to go through with it, because she wanted her son to have a happy life. Her friends got it, totally understood, and promised to handle everything else, so she thanked them. No matter what condition Lacy was in, nobody would dare make fun of a noble emperor's lineage. That settled the rumor problem. But people still kept whispering behind their backs. The nobles started gossiping that if His Majesty returned and found out about this, Angela would be in deep trouble. Sienna assured Her Majesty that wouldn't happen, explaining that in this situation, the rumors would have reached the emperor a long time ago. She added that if he wasn't back yet, there was no need to worry so much. Plus, her financial situation hadn't changed. That meant her family still had her back, and the rumors would die down soon enough, like always. Now Angela realized she dragged Sienna into her mess, and out of gratitude, declared that she would fulfill her promise. After thanking Her Majesty, the maid returned to the Ruby Palace, where Princess Aris immediately threw her arms around her. The little girl said she missed her like crazy and swore she'd never let her go again. The kid also confessed she kept studying while she was gone, but then asked if they could go on a picnic together. Aris had dressed up special for it and looked so gorgeous, Sienna started worrying someone would snatch her. They picked a secluded spot in the Imperial Palace for their picnic, somewhere quiet and super cozy. The maid was stoked the princess finally got out of the palace, and the princess was happy as a clam. The maids were even playing with her, acting out different fairy tale characters to keep her entertained. While she was skipping around and having fun in the meadow, Eris noticed a boy painting a picture and asked what it was. Meanwhile, back at Rashid's palace, he was asking a guard when his father would be back, and found out he needed more time to recover. It's been almost 6 months since the prince has been handling things for him, and he knew that was way too long for a simple recovery. Sul also explained that the emperor was having trouble with headaches, and his condition was getting worse every day. The guards swore they were about to get some good news, so Rashid suggested they take a walk outside. While walking, he ran into that crew from the Ruby Palace, but Eris, being Eris, just assumed her brother was following them. Then, His Majesty spotted Angela there too, which totally surprised him. The lady explained she just stepped out for a short walk with her son and happened to bump into Princess Eris. Right then, Rashid noticed Lacy's stare and figured the kid was about to have his head chopped off. But Angela explained the boy hadn't quite mastered all the etiquette yet and asked him to forgive him. Rashid still didn't get why he was staring like that, and the prince's mom explained he just wanted to draw his relative. The lady added that Lacy always wants to draw something beautiful when he sees it, and again asked him not to be angry. Eris jumped into the conversation at that point and started insisting her little brother's paintings are super beautiful. Then the girl remembered the first time they met, and Angela started explaining to the kids who was who. Her Majesty was also super stoked to see Siana again, and Siana explained they were just out for a picnic. Then, Angela thanked the little princess for letting them hang with Siana for a bit, saying she was a huge help. After that, the Empress promoted the twin maids to mid-level, figuring it was a win-win for everyone. Nini and Nana were at a loss for how to thank her, but she told them to thank their friend instead. That's when they started begging Siana to let them do something for her as a thank you, but she was just happy they took care of Aris. They were still super grateful, because if it weren't for her, they'd still be getting exploited, working like dogs for peanuts. The little princess noticed then that Lacey was drawing, and he was actually really good at it. The kid confessed he only wanted to draw beautiful things, and then Aris asked him to draw her. Soon, the picture came out totally amazing, and it even seemed to have a rose scent coming from it. All the while, the girl was muttering that the other royals only knew how to curse, but Lacey was a straight-up talent. Siana, the maid, backed that up, saying His Highness's skills were seriously off the charts. So, Prince Rashid decided to ask the kid to draw him himself, because he wanted to see his younger brother's skills firsthand. Then Siana noticed His Majesty seemed to be enjoying posing, but he said he was just messing around. Rashid also liked that, thanks to this maid, he could get some great tea, and then he asked her to chat with him. He asked her what was so great about drawing, and that's when she handed him a quill and told him to give it a shot. His Majesty agreed and started drawing Siana's portrait, but naturally, all he managed was a funny caricature. Rashid admitted that this kind of thing wasn't for him, and the maid explained it's important to know what you're good at. She explained that instead of putting everything off till later, he could just give up and not do what he sucks at. Then Siana added that people tend to obsess over what they don't have, so she thought it was important to realize that right away. Better to crush it at what you're good at than stress about what you're bad at. Rashid just burst out laughing. He finally understood why she went from princess to maid. His Majesty realized she was way happier like this and told her he was happy for her. She wasn't expecting to hear that, even though becoming a mid-level maid was a huge deal for her. It's way harder for a foreigner from a defeated country to pull that off, easier to grab a star from the sky. But Siana did it, and Rashid was genuinely happy for her. He had no idea she got that position through some shady stuff, and thanks to Her Majesty. But right now, Siana was feeling butterflies in her stomach. The maid thanked the emperor for his congratulations, and her smile seemed even sweeter to him. Rashid suddenly had this urge to wrap her in his arms and never let go. Right when he was lost in his head, the guard soul interrupted, announcing the little prince's drawing was ready. Everyone rushed to see the results and just froze, stunned. The emperor's portrait was unbelievably gorgeous, like he was about to step right off the page. That's how lifelike it was. Because Lacey really is an artist who got a gift instead of the normal life the devil stole from him. And out of the hundreds of paintings he'll do, the ones that'll go down in history, this one's gonna be one of the greats. Later, Siana got her new uniform, and Aris said she looked like a ripe peach among green leaves. The girl loved the uniform too. It wasn't all worn out like the ones the lower-level maids got. The twins got the same uniforms, and they were totally stoked. Earlier, the princess got a letter from her grandma, who heard her maids were leaving for training. So she's inviting the little one to her palace, so she won't be all alone and bored. Taking advantage of the situation, Eris decided to throw a banquet every single day while she was living in that palace. She'll eat whatever she wants, get whatever she asks for, and generally try to squeeze every last penny out of the old lady. It was time for the maids to leave, and Aris threatened Siana that when she got back, she wouldn't let her out of her arms, and the way she looked at her favorite maid at that moment really made the twins happy. Arriving at their destination, the maids noticed the atmosphere was totally different there. There were a ton of mid-level maids there, but you could feel some kind of tension in the air. Megan came out to greet the newbies and immediately warned them in a slightly annoyed tone that even though they passed the exam, they hadn't officially received their status yet. They'd have 3 weeks of training, and if any questions about their qualifications came up, they'd get demoted again. The maids' duties are strictly divided. The lowest-level maids are responsible for cleaning and laundry. They're managed by mid-level maids, making sure the work goes smoothly. Top-tier maids? They're basically serving the lords themselves. They'll each have a designated spot, yeah, but that's just for show, things get switched up. Even though Siana was experienced, she was hoping the local maids would give her a hand. Then hit her up. reminding her that she's known as the troublemaker from the conquered country. Heard she had support on the outside, but said she'd only be judged on her skills. And starting today, Sienna's in charge of prepping ingredients in the kitchen. She better be ready because if she screws up, they'll rat her out immediately. The girl got the feeling that just didn't like her for no good reason. Even though she actually likes being around a bunch of people who have their own systems and ways of doing things. The maid assigned to work with her just told her to watch and figure things out herself. So, Sienna heads into the kitchen, greeting everyone right from the doorway. But all eyes were glued to her, and it felt like a cold chill running right through her bones. The atmosphere was super grim, and the maids themselves looked pissed, like straight-up demons. Moving further in, Sienna caught a familiar wicked giggle. She turned around and saw Jean, who looked like she was already plotting something. You could tell by her tone that she wasn't thrilled about Sienna being there. Not long ago, when they told her about a new mid-level maid, Jean couldn't believe it. Plus, they told her to keep an eye on her, since all the lower-level maids listened to her. And now, Jean was practically green with envy that Sienna reached that level in almost no time at all. She couldn't figure out why she hadn't just croaked in that ruby palace. Then Jean started spreading lies, saying Sienna used some kind of trickery to get the position. Like they came together, and there's no way she could have made it to the official training stage otherwise. That ginger witch started rumors that Sienna was a liar and stubborn as hell, and that she only got promoted because she stabbed her friend in the back. Now, seeing all those looks, Sienna realized Jean had been running her name through the mud. But that didn't break her. She boldly announced that she was in charge of these maids from now on. So they better show her some respect, seeing as they couldn't even be bothered to say hello. Then Sienna gave him a piece of her mind, the kind of stuff that usually scares people, and Jean just stood there on the sidelines, grinding her teeth with rage. Then she petulantly declared that she wasn't taking orders, since this was her turf. She's back at it again, saying Sienna didn't earn her position, and so Gina won't let anyone listen to her. And she even added that caring for the princess gets you nowhere, and everyone thinks Sienna's useless here. That's when the redhead caught a well-deserved smack across her arrogant face, and Sienna, in a calm voice, announced that everyone's fired if they're not going to cooperate. She also didn't deny that she didn't exactly get the mid-level maid position fairly. She got the spot because of a recommendation from some big shot higher up. Sienna threatened to tell that person that they weren't listening to her, and that would cause them problems. Because when she's asked why the maids aren't listening, she'll say it's because they don't take her seriously, just because she was recommended by that person. In that case, all the lower-level maids are gonna have a bad time. The girls were freaked they were gonna get reamed, so they bowed their heads and greeted Sienna. But Jean kept bitching, not believing her backer was anyone from the royal family. Those words were starting to piss Sienna off, and she shot a death glare at the red-haired jerk. That look, the kind that chills you to the bone, actually gave Jean the creeps. But she still threatened to rat Sienna out the exact same way. And she stormed off, slamming the door, while Sienna was just glad she didn't have to keep making excuses or inventing stuff. She'd made a decent impression on the others anyway. Now she could finally get to work and started asking the maids what and how much food had been delivered to the kitchen. The rest of the day went by like that, and no other problems came up. Sienna was checking the supplies, where you gotta check not just the quantity, but the expiration dates too. Everyone was stuck here till dawn because of that, and their arms were killing them. There was still a ton of work left, but Sienna suggested everyone take a break and grab some grub. The food looked simple, but the maids were so tired it tasted incredible. This was the leftovers after the mid-level maids had their fill. Sienna also knew the others would be uncomfortable eating with her around, so she was gonna sit separately. Afterwards, the girls started talking about how Sienna was a pretty good worker, and things would fall into place under her. They even hoped they could work with her at the palace after training, and Jean overheard them. Rage filled her again, and she wouldn't be calm until Sienna was groveling at her feet. Then she yelled at the others, painting Sienna in the worst possible light and reminding them she'd threatened them not long ago. Jean was shocked to hear the other maids now had a good opinion of their supervisor. Totally done with that kind of talk, she stormed out of the kitchen, cursing Sienna under her breath. It pissed her off that these maids already forgot who put food on their damn tables. So, she swore she wouldn't let Sienna become a mid-level maid, not on her watch. She even thought about torching the whole place, but realized that'd be going too far. Instead, she decided to smear Sienna's name again, and headed off to find maid. A week had passed since then, and Sienna was feeling drained and sleep-deprived. She was stuck working late, and out of nowhere, everyone started nitpicking everything she did. Sienna got blamed for sharing leftovers with the maids, like they'd get spoiled or something. But the way she saw it, what was the big deal? But started yelling that the maids would lose all respect for the mid-level staff if they did that. Sienna kept arguing that their work efficiency had actually gone up. They were even getting better ratings in the other kitchens now. But those excuses didn't fly. Kept tearing into her, nitpicking every little thing. Sienna wasn't really mad. She knew it was just part of the job, and she was ready to handle whatever came her way. The next day, when she got to the warehouse, she saw the maids had arrived way too early. They had a ton of work, but luckily, they'd prepped some stuff the night before. Plus, the new system meant they weren't mixing up which ingredients went to which kitchen anymore. But everyone freaked out when they walked into the kitchen. It was completely trashed. Sienna was the most shocked, but she had a pretty good idea who was behind it. Plus, there was a mouse just strolling around, chowing down on the spilled food like it owned the place. All three of them had to bust their asses to get everything back in order, and they were practically dead on their feet. As soon as they were done, came in, totally pissed, wanting to know what the hell was going on and why all the noise. Jan was right behind her, needling them about how badly the place was being run, saying that's why they had a mouse problem. And suggested Sion, who was so confident yesterday, try to explain herself. After all, she'd said there was nothing to worry about, but it looks like things aren't so great, huh? Then she reminded her that this kind of thing happens when you let the lower-level maids off the leash. Jean was just loving it, figuring Sion would start begging not to demote her. But then she suddenly admitted she was to blame for the mess, but said she needed to figure something else out before she took her punishment. A lot of ingredients are ruined, and they're gonna be making breakfast soon, so there could be problems. Plus, mice can spread germs and diseases, and that raises the risk of an epidemic breaking out. So even ingredients we thought were safe, locked away in the cupboards, could be totally ruined. Sienna wanted none of that mess, but she asked for a chance to fix things, and promised to make damn sure all the food supplies arrived on time. Meanwhile, Rashid was still out cold, sawing logs in bed, when Sul walked in and told him someone was here to see him. The Emperor scowled, but when he heard it was Lady Sienna, he shot right out of bed, completely confused why she'd show up so early, especially since she's supposed to be in training. He figured she'd had a fight with someone, or maybe someone attacked her, and now Sienna was probably standing at his door, all teary-eyed, needing his comfort. Turns out the girl was pretty chill, and first thing she does is apologize for bothering me so early. But Rashid was still riding that adrenaline rush, so he asked her to spill the beans. What's going on? Sienna told him that mice got into the warehouse and ruined all the food. Rashid wasn't sweating it, of course, but he was still stoked this girl came to him for help. When he invited her inside, Sienna asked him for some food supplies from his palace. He thought that was a pretty ballsy request, but he wasn't even mad. He just wondered how she planned to pay him back, 'cause considering the situation, she'd need a lot. Hanging her head, Sienna promised to pay it all back, hoping she could save up enough in a few years. Rashid was silent, and the girl, head held high, swore she'd make it right with him. The Emperor was a little confused, like, she could have just asked. He would have helped her out anyway. Then he started asking if they were putting her down at work, and Sienna assured him there were no problems with that. Rashid then told her to take whatever she needed, adding that he wouldn't charge her for it. The girl was surprised. He probably wanted something else, but he hadn't named his price yet. He just explained that when he figured it out, he'd find Sienna and tell her what he wanted. Soon, Sienna arrived at the food warehouse and started ordering everyone to unload everything quickly. The maids got to work while Jean was confused, not understanding where she got all this stuff. She even started to think that Sienna was a witch. Then she started looking at the products, but they immediately started rushing her to help with the work. Not having anything to say against it, the redhead picked up a box that seemed incredibly heavy to her, and by the end of the unloading, all the maids collapsed back into their chairs, completely wiped out. They were stoked they finished on time, and thanked Sienna for making it happen. She returned the favor, praising the maids for their hard work. Then the girls got curious and asked where she got all the supplies, and Sienna just smirked. Then she confessed a nobleman had helped her out. The maids figured the guy probably had his own warehouse. to get the stuff that fast. Now they were sure Sienna had a high-class sugar daddy. Even Jean was starting to buy it. It pissed her off that Sienna was ahead of her, not just in rank, but also in the imperial family's favor. It's pretty obvious this nobleman has genuine feelings for her. But then Jean got scared Sienna might snitch on her, so she decided to zip it. Just then, Sienna's voice rang out behind her, wanting to know if the redhead was involved. Jean totally lost it, screaming that she fell asleep early yesterday and wasn't even near the warehouse, which is exactly how she blew her cover, because Sienna hadn't even mentioned the warehouse. Plus, first thing this morning, Jean walks in and announces there are rats in the warehouse. So it all clicks. Was chewing out Sienna yesterday to distract everyone while Jean pulled her dirty trick. And let's be real, the look on Jean's face this morning when she walked in said it all. Still, she insisted it was just suspicion and swore she had no reason to pull a stunt like that. Sienna didn't want to argue too much, just said there'd be an investigation, and they'd quickly find out who had the warehouse key yesterday. Besides, this palace has ears everywhere, and it won't take long to find out who snuck those mice into the warehouse. Jean was green with anxiety, but still kept trying to defend herself. And when the Imperial Palace hears about something like this, they won't waste time figuring it out. They'll just kick everyone out. Jean's betting Sienna won't report this, since she's responsible for the other maids. Sienna shot the redhead a dark look, then told her she could see right through her. And she reminded her that a big shot's got her back, and he wouldn't let her get dragged into trouble. So Jean's the only one who's gonna pay for this mess, since she could have hurt the imperial family. In a fit of rage, Jean yelled that she just wanted to mess with Sienna. But her words sounded more like an admission of guilt. Realizing that, she got down on her knees and begged Sienna not to fire her, finally admitting she was wrong. But Sienna told her to spill the whole truth if she really wanted forgiveness. Leaning in a little, Sienna asked who else was behind this whole thing, and the redhead confessed that she asked to distract Sienna while she let the mice loose. That's when the maid, barged in, screaming that this was total BS and she had nothing to do with it. Still, she begged them to keep it a secret, even promising to apologize to Sienna. But Sienna just started playing games, saying her patron was super worried about the whole thing, even suspected she was being bullied. Now she was acting like she didn't know what to do, like she couldn't lie to her patron. Knowing the fate they could face, Jean and started sincerely begging her for forgiveness. Then Sienna suggested they just pretend nothing happened, so that mysterious guy wouldn't have to worry. Plus, the food she brought would be enough for the whole palace, but it cost a pretty penny. And since Jean and were responsible for the incident, they were gonna have to take the heat for it. And as Sienna wished, the guilty maids were handed down a harsh punishment. For conspiring with a low-level maid and for bribery, the servant was demoted to the lowest rank. Jean, that sneaky troublemaker, got demoted to intern. Talk about a total humiliation. And to top it off, they're docking her pay for all the ruined food. As for the rest of the maids who actually did their jobs, they're getting a bonus. Later, Emperor Rashid summoned Sienna and praised her amazing talent. But after really looking at her, he noticed she seemed upset about something. Even though she was trying to act all distant, she asked how His Majesty could tell. She got the feeling like he could somehow read people's emotions. Rashid admitted he didn't have any powers like that, but he was good at taking care of those who were vulnerable. Just then, he held out his hand, and a little bird landed on it, and Sienna realized he saw her as a pet. Then Rashid promised he'd listen if she ever wanted to talk about what happened. Sienna appreciated him helping her out, but she was worried about Jean, who was bawling her eyes out for the first time ever. All she ever wanted was to be a top-tier maid, and now she was so crushed she couldn't even say a word. And now Sienna felt guilty for ruining that maid's dream. Still, she didn't regret punishing her. It was necessary to prevent stuff like that from happening again, because if someone screws up and doesn't get punished, they'll never learn to regret it. The prince suddenly remembered that her expression at the time was just killer, but he totally dug it. He even leaned in towards Sienna and lightly touched her cheek. Rashid realized that when she needed to be, this girl could be seriously tough. Sienna even blushed and quietly thanked him for the compliment, feeling a little awkward and surprised. At the same time, she noticed the weird look Rashid was giving her at that moment. Then he confessed he liked her personality. Otherwise, she'd have a rough time later on. To kinda steer Rashid away from the topic, Sienna asked what he wanted in exchange for the food. She was hoping he'd just ask for tea like always. But Rashid suddenly asked her to go on a date with him. After that bombshell, Siana was speechless. She figured he was just messing with her. Rashid realized he was too blunt and explained he had business outside the palace and wanted to take Siana along. The reason for this was even weirder. The dude explained he was scared to go alone. The girl started trying to talk him out of it, since she didn't have the right permission to leave. But Rashid told her not to worry about it, assuring her there wouldn't be any problems. Siana knew herself. Nobody would go against the crown prince, but she still couldn't believe they were going on a date. When they arrived, Rashid was about to get out, but Siana stopped him. Just a reminder, you're the prince, and you shouldn't be wandering around alone without guards. You could run into the assassin, and then we'd have a real problem on our hands. She also pointed out how he was dressed, saying a prince sticks out like a sore thumb. She explained her worry by saying she was just a maid, and it was her job to worry. So Rashid agreed to disguise himself as a commoner, so he wouldn't need security. They headed to the market, which was overflowing with all kinds of fruits and vegetables. Rashid admitted it was his first time ever at a market, and he'd pretty much spent his whole childhood locked up in the palace. And when he got older, he was shipped off to the battlefield. It's only been a few months since he and Siana came back to the palace. The girl suddenly realized they actually had something in common, even though she always thought they were total opposites. She was so lost in thought that his last words went right over her head. Rashid repeated himself, saying he was talking about the festival, which was supposed to be today. They paused briefly by the fountain to take in the view. Then Siana's stomach started growling, and Rashid, realizing she was hungry, suggested grabbing a bite. The girl was down, but asked if they could hit up that shop with the most refreshing beer in the whole empire. Rashid was a little surprised Siana liked beer. But hey, she's a grown woman. Besides, according to the maids, it helps you unwind after a long day and forget about your troubles. Of course, Siana had never actually tried beer before, and as soon as she took a sip, she started ranting about being lied to. But the alcohol was doing its thing, and the girl asked for another one. Rashid was worried she'd get drunk fast, but he knew it was already happening when she confessed she suddenly felt hot. He wasn't drinking, said he had to drive her home later. They hung out a little longer, and the ride back turned out to be way more fun than expected. Siana, hiccuping now and then, insisted she wasn't Rashid's pet, and wanted to know if he thought she was cute. Then she started squishing his cheeks herself, saying he was just as cute as she was. And then, from out of nowhere, she got this burst of courage. Although, why wouldn't she? Siana leaned in and kissed Rashid on the nose, because she just couldn't resist how good-looking he was. The guy was totally flustered. For the first time ever, he was speechless. And she, noticing his embarrassed look, confessed that every time he looked at her like that, she got all these feelings. And now she wanted him to feel something like that too. The next morning, Siana woke up to birds chirping outside her window, and the sun was already shining bright in her room. The girl woke up, realized it was already late, and freaked out that she'd overslept. She threw herself together and showed up at the warehouse, apologizing for being late the second she walked in. But she noticed the maids weren't really doing anything, and they explained everyone got the day off. Some other maids were working in place of her crew, brought in on short notice. They were also told to get some rest today, since they're always swamped and need to recharge. Even more shocking to Siana was that the crown prince himself gave the order. The maids used to think he was scary, but now they're convinced he's the best ruler ever. He even sent them food. It was just soup. But for Siana, it was the perfect hangover cure. Realizing Rashid did all this for her, the girl felt guilty, but started slurping down the broth anyway. It was still warm, and her stomach instantly felt amazing. Siana had barely gotten a few bites in when she heard a familiar voice behind her. Jean walked in and quietly confessed that she was allowed to start classes again tomorrow. Siana didn't know what to think, like she was somehow to blame now. For a moment, Jean just stood there silently, like a kid who'd been caught doing something wrong. And then she admitted she felt really guilty about what she did to Siana and was genuinely sorry. She also said she didn't want to lie to her anymore because it was just too hard on her. Siana calmly explained that lies are like an avalanche. One day, they might just crush the liar. Still, she was glad Jean had decided to take responsibility for her actions. The redhead couldn't say anything at that moment except to express her gratitude. Siana mostly just chilled in bed the rest of the day and felt refreshed by evening. still feeling that hangover, 'cause she definitely overdid it last night. But then it hit her. She touched the crown prince's cheek, and she started mentally kicking her own ass. Felt like she was pulling on a wad of Play-Doh at the time. Xian got so mortified, she was still chewing herself out when the other maids told her to keep it down. I mean, she'd try to explain later, like, I got caught up in the vibe and it was my first beer. But deep down, she knew Rashid let her get away with it because he thought she was cute, which just pissed her off even more. Him treating her like some little pet. So she vowed to apologize for acting like a total idiot. She decided to catch up with him the next day, after her shift ended. Meanwhile, His Highness had been in bed for ages. But sleep just wouldn't come. He couldn't shake the memory of Sienna's kiss, and he was dying to see what her face would look like when she showed up. Rashid caught himself again, looking forward to seeing this girl. Meanwhile, a maid was walking down a warehouse hallway with a candle in her hand. She went into one of the rooms and noticed the food supplies were scattered all over the place again. The next day, Sienna showed up to see His Highness and apologized for what happened before. And she clarified that she was apologizing for her inappropriate behavior. The girl vividly remembered pulling his cheek, and she must have done it hard, 'cause she's always kneading dough in the warehouse. It was totally unintentional. But the prince was curious what else she remembered. Turns out, that's where her memories of that night cut off. Rashid started hinting that there was something even weirder, and Sienna got freaked out that she might have punched him. Realizing the maid was taking forever to catch on, His Highness decided to give her a hint. He leaned down and booped her on the nose, just like she'd done to him. Then he explained that it had totally caught him off guard, but told her not to apologize 'cause he liked it. After that, he took her hand, held it to his cheek, gave her a sweet smile, and gave her those puppy dog eyes again. Sienna felt mortified, blushed like crazy, and vowed to never drink again. Later, when she got back to the warehouse, she was told that the supplies were disappearing fast. Princess Grace's requests from the palace were skyrocketing, like she'd hired a ton of new maids. But the number of servants was the same as always, which meant someone was stealing the food. Sienna headed over there to sort things out and ran into their head maid, who'd also noticed something weird. Food kept vanishing from their palace too. Even the desserts we make for guests are disappearing without a trace. There's probably a thief among the maids, even though security is tight and it's hard to get past unnoticed. They even started hiding the supplies, but they're still vanishing. The situation was serious, and Sienna decided to find the culprit ASAP. That maid suspected one servant who started working here 3 months ago. She's tall as a giant, big as a bear, and strong as an ox. A real monster, basically. That description fit Choo-Choo the most. And Sienna couldn't believe her best friend was capable of that. Choo-Choo does eat a lot, but she'd never do something like this. Later they met, and Sienna told her friend that she was suspected of stealing the food. Naturally, she blew up instantly, claiming she didn't do anything like that. Then she asked Sienna if she knew who the real thief was, but she didn't have any leads yet. Still, she's in charge of food management, so it's her job to figure out who the perp is. She's not gonna make a scene, even if she finds the thief. She just wants them to promise not to do it again. Choo-Choo decided to tell her from the start how she ended up in this palace. She was called in to work for Princess Greitz, who was famous for being a super refined lady. And Choo-Choo was surprised why someone like her was sent there, and they even made her an official maid. The emperor's third daughter is known for her beauty. He has 7 daughters in total, and the maid's job is to serve the princess and help maintain her flawless beauty. Every morning they applied the best lotion to her face, prepared the day before, and they would comb her long hair for an hour straight. Grace takes a milk bath every evening and gets a lavender oil massage before bed. Choo-Choo's job was to make sure the princess's delicate skin never got a single tan. That meant lugging an umbrella around for her whenever she went outside. The rest of the time, Choo-Choo did other chores, like sweeping the garden paths. One day, she overheard people saying Grace might be sick because she wasn't eating much. Then it came out that food was going missing, even the jerky they made for snacks. They decided not to make a fuss, since the princess wasn't eating much anyway. But they couldn't let a thief get away with it, and Choo-Choo couldn't let anyone hurt her princess. So she decided to find out who was sneaking into the pantry to steal food. That night, in the dim light, she saw the silhouette of a girl. I was about to tear into her, ready to drag her by the hair for stealing from the princess, who barely eats anything as it is. Screaming, Choo-Choo was just about to grab the thief when she turned around. To the maid's surprise, the culprit was Princess Grace herself, who looked terrified she'd been caught eating. She even dropped the bread roll on the floor. Now, talking to Siana, Choo-Choo was hoping this was all some kind of misunderstanding. But the strong woman wasn't sure if she should reveal who she caught red-handed last night. Grace threatened her, saying if she breathed a word of this, she and her entire family would regret it. The princess swore she'd haunt her family for generations, spreading fear and terror. Still, Choo-Choo told her best friend, hoping she could help with this situation. Siana just said that in that case, there's no need to continue the investigation. Because if she found the culprit, the princess would totally turn on her, and she'd probably order her head chopped off right then and there. Choo-Choo argued she thought the princess was an angel and didn't believe she was capable of cruelty. But Siana was worried her friend might get accused of stealing food, but Choo-Choo didn't seem to care. She'd rather hear it's a buff maid stealing than the beautiful princess. Besides, Lady Grace had been nice to her ever since that incident. Siana didn't see anything good about that and kept worrying about her friend. She praised Choo-Choo for her kindness, which made her blush a little. And then she got curious about how the princess could fit so much food, 'cause a lot went missing. Plus, how can she stay so slim? Siana thought for a sec, then smiled, remembering there's one trick nobles use. And Choo-Choo was surprised, 'cause she has to train like crazy just to stay in shape. Turns out, it wasn't as great a method as she'd thought. After that, the girls said goodbye, and Siana invited Choo-Choo to hang out whenever she was free. Later, hitting the warehouse, Siana asked if they'd caught the crook. They immediately told her the princess's maids figured out who was eyeing the food. Just like Siana feared, all fingers pointed at Choo-Choo, since she was the new girl in the palace. Without a word, the girl bolted straight out of the kitchen. She couldn't believe her best friend, the kindest person ever, was accused of stealing. Siana headed to the princess's palace, but they told her there was no reason to let her in, since they'd caught the thief. She still started arguing that Choo-Choo wasn't guilty, but another maid found out Siana trained with Choo-Choo, though she was willing to call it a coincidence. If Siana knew everyone was so hostile towards her friend, she wouldn't have wrapped up the investigation so fast. Still, she demanded proof that Choo-Choo was actually responsible for what happened. Of course, there wasn't any proof. Everyone was just talking about her, and now she's locked in her room. That pissed Siana off, since they locked up a maid based on nothing but their suspicions. But the princess's maid just threatened to report it to the head inspector, and then Siana could be accused of being an accomplice too. The thing is, the inspector didn't deal with stuff like this, so it was convenient to just blame one maid and be done with it. All the maids in the princess's palace disliked Choo-Choo, and it was in their interest to point the finger at her. Siana wasn't about to abandon her friend, so she caught up to the maid and blocked her path. Then she demanded, real angrily, to see the princess. She got shut down, told Lady Grace doesn't talk to mid-level maids. Figuring she wasn't getting in, Siana turned around and left, but only 'cause she's got other ways to play this. Later, Princess Grace was at her table, getting served her usual tiny portion of food. She also got a note from that maid, Siana. After a while, they met up in the garden, and the maid gave her a polite hello. The princess cut right to it, asking if Siana knew who the real culprit was. Then she demanded she spill everything she knew about the case. When Siana pointed the finger at the princess, she realized the maid just wanted to get her friend off the hook. Besides, the maid doesn't have any actual proof, and the only one who knows the truth is locked up tight and won't say a word without permission. Siana had a theory. She asked around about rumors and figured out that Lady Grace usually eats next to nothing. A normal person would have passed out from eating that little a long time ago. So, she started suspecting the princess was getting food somewhere else. Grace started arguing, saying she's a princess and couldn't possibly be eating on the side, especially so much. Otherwise, she'd be as fat as a pig by now. But Siana knew that nobles go to extremes to keep their figures, and one of the tricks is to pig out first, then force yourself to throw up. That way, you never gain weight no matter how much you eat, but it puts a huge strain on your body. All that puking makes it a pain to swallow, and it'll drain you mentally. Then, you start throwing up without even trying, just because you're scared of gaining weight. Trust me, all this can really mess you up. The princess was curious how a simple servant knew all this, but Siana had been through it herself and claimed she knew a way to escape this hell. Besides, Your Highness doesn't need to expose the culprit, but she does have to free Choo-Choo. And if Lady Grace agrees to this, Siana promised to help her. Choo-Choo was soon released and, as ordered, headed to the princess's study. But when she walked in, she was genuinely surprised. She wasn't expecting to see Sienna there, not just present, but sitting right next to the princess. Lady Grace said she knew they were friends, and that the maid came with her service. First, the friends hugged, and Choo-Choo even bragged that she finally got some decent rest, which was good enough for her, because more rest, and she'd start losing muscle. Grace remembered her maids reporting that they'd ID'd the culprit. She was even surprised, because she already knew the truth. Still, she decided to frame Choo-Choo, hoping to make it up to her with money later. But right now, she had a sharp lump stuck in her throat. Just then, Choo-Choo started thanking the princess for letting her out. Lady Grace told her not to thank her, admitting she didn't want to lock her up. Then she guiltily scolded herself for secretly swiping food from the warehouse. The maids were scratching their heads. The grub belongs to royalty anyway, so she wasn't stealing, just taking what's hers. The princess knew every single word the maid said was the honest truth. And she remembered Choo-Choo telling her she could have just asked for food, instead of sneaking around at night like some common thief, and Grace was torn about what to do next. Not wanting to get busted, she threatened the maid to keep her mouth shut, because if she didn't, she and her whole damn family would regret it. That same night, Choo-Choo brought the princess a sausage roll, saying it tastes way better this way. Grace was caught off guard, but the maid wasn't looking at her with pity or forcing a fake smile. It hit her that Choo-Choo wasn't looking down on her, and after trying the sausage roll, she agreed it was actually bomb. This maid respected the princess and kept her secret, even when she got nailed for stealing. And get this, Her Highness straight up apologized to her, admitted she was a coward and totally shouldn't have treated her like that. Both maids were completely stunned, never expecting the princess to act like that. Later, Choo-Choo got the green light to pour tea for the lady, and she was so nervous. She was like a bear terrified of spilling a single drop of honey. But the princess loved the tea she made, said it tasted kinda like honey. Grace even took 2 sips, then suddenly remembered she'd get fat from it. Sienna, who was still nearby, saw the princess freak out and told her 2 sips wouldn't do anything. Then she asked Her Highness to spill the tea on when all this started. And the princess confessed that her mom mostly cared about her older brother, since he was closer to the throne, so Grace could basically live however she wanted. She's the daughter of Empress Layla III, and since she was a kid, she's loved to chow down. Being born a princess, she got to eat all kinds of amazing, delicious food. It made her happy, and mostly she just thought about what she'd be eating next. But pretty soon, Her Highness had packed on the pounds and looked like a potato in a dress. People whispered that no one would ever marry her looking like that. Then one day, when Grace was a bit older, her mom told her to stop eating so much because she was getting engaged soon. Her partner was supposed to be Isaac von Hastings, the 3rd son of Count Hastings. The princess had actually seen this young dude before. He was a handsome, fit guy, and he caught her stuffing her face. Her Highness fell head over heels for him the second she saw him, and on top of that, he was a total gentleman. He even helped her wipe crumbs off her mouth. When Grace found out she was engaged to him, she was so stoked she was a princess and got assigned such a catch. But her mom told her to keep it classy and not act like a moron when Isaac came over. The day the Earl's son showed up, he looked even hotter, like he'd grown into a total Adonis. Their meeting started off awesome, and Grace was on cloud 9 when he kissed her hand. He even confessed he had really warm feelings for her, which the princess bought without question. Back then, it seemed like true love. Even the maids were saying no one else ever gave the princess a second look. But this guy fell right away. Grace's face was seriously gorgeous, so she didn't doubt his feelings were real. And before they knew it, the date for their engagement was set. In the hall, she spotted a bunch of girls who were totally crushing on Isaac. One of them was a knockout, but she made sure to compliment the princess when she walked in. Then, all the other young ladies piled on, gushing about how great Grace looked. Right in the middle of the praise fest, Isaac himself showed up, announcing he just had to greet Her Highness. Right in front of everyone, he dropped to one knee and kissed her hand. Then he asked how the princess was doing, and she asked about his stuff too. Isaac then raved about the chocolate cake she'd sent, saying it just melted in his mouth. The princess actually blushed a little, admitting she'd been nervous. Just then, that gorgeous girl, Julia, strolled over, remarking how close those two seemed. Grace couldn't stop thinking that this handsome dude was about to become her fiancé. She whispered to her friends that they'd been engaged for ages, They looked like a perfect couple from the outside, even though the princess was a bit on the hefty side. But then Grace noticed that the young ladies had a really weird reaction to her confession. A little later, they were officially announced as engaged, and the guests offered their congratulations. Then Lady Layla stepped up, thanked everyone for their kind words, and started reading her speech. Just then, Grace glanced at her fiancé and noticed he was looking at her too, smiling. It made her happy, and then she went back to grab another bite to eat. But then she realized Isaac had totally vanished. The princess went looking for him all over the palace, but couldn't find him for the longest time. Stepping out into the garden, I saw his broad shoulders and finally felt like I'd found what I was looking for. But as Grace got closer, she saw something awful. Isaac was standing there in the garden with Julia. From the tone of their conversation, it was clear this wasn't just a friendly chat. The princess overheard Isaac saying he'd promised Julia he'd propose to her when she grew up. The earl himself explained that those were just some careless words tossed out by a 10-year-old kid. But now things were different. He was 17, and Julia was 14, and they weren't kids anymore. Then Isaac asked her to keep her composure and pretend they didn't know each other. The earl was playing it safe, knowing this could cause a real scandal. Meanwhile, Grace was praying that Isaac wouldn't break off their engagement for that skinny beauty, who was apologizing for her tone, saying she was just stunned by the news of his engagement. Then she saw them start to say their goodbyes, and her fiancé explained why he hadn't told her everything sooner. Before leaving, Julia asked Isaac if he even wanted to marry Lady Grace. The girl humbly said she understood everything, but reminded him that the princess was a little chubby, and that there were a lot of rumors going around about her among the other girls. The bride was fuming at this point, guessing what was coming next. Supposedly, in her tight pink dress, and with her pale skin, Grace looked more like a pork sausage. Grace wanted to jump out of hiding and tear the mouth off the jerk who was talking about her like that. She was barely holding back when Isaac suddenly said he already knew all these rumors. Plus, he'd never liked fat girls, and Julia didn't understand why he wanted this marriage so badly. Grace wanted to scream that she knew exactly how her fiancé really felt. He explained that the marriage was super beneficial for his family, and he had no choice but to suck it up. Now the princess knew all those compliments about her beauty were total BS, and bummed out, she just bailed. Her dress brushed against some bushes, and Isaac and Julia realized someone was nearby. The princess went back to her place totally crushed. She didn't even feel like taking out that hottie anymore. She just wanted to crawl into a hole and cry forever. Her face was already a complete mess of tears when she got to the mirror and collapsed in front of it. But from that day on, she started dieting, and 3 months later, Isaac turned 17. The third empress came to congratulate him, but Grace was nowhere to be seen. Some of the guests started worrying that she wouldn't show, but the earl assured them that according to Layla's promise, she'd be there soon. The truth was, they hadn't seen each other since the engagement party, and had only communicated through letters. The princess was blaming it on feeling under the weather, and now her friends were worried she'd miss her fiancé's birthday. Someone joked she couldn't handle the makeup, which wouldn't make her look like Julia anyway. But the girls knew the truth. Isaac wasn't interested in that loud, fat girl with the empty stare. Just then, the young ladies noticed a strange look on the young count's face. The third empress turned to look as well, and the girls wondered who they were staring at. That's when they heard a familiar voice, belonging to someone they weren't expecting. Princess Grace stood before them, and she looked completely different. Her chubby cheeks were gone, she had a waist, and now she was here to greet her fiancé. All the ladies were shocked, but especially Isaac. Grace was saying that since it's his birthday today, she wanted to go all out. Now his feelings have totally flipped. The young earl sincerely took her hand, and with genuine respect, he knelt and kissed her hand. Grace finally saw his face when he was truly amazed, but she had to cut portions and take lots of walks to get this look. The princess hoped she'd finally be truly happy now. But honestly, she just felt relief when she threw everything back up. And the more she ate, the more she threw up. And Grace realized this was the answer. After hearing her, the maids realized the princess wasn't eating properly at all, and she barely touched her food at the table, so she wouldn't puke in front of everyone. While others didn't think her not eating was weird, they actually thought she was pretty elegant. For a while, the princess held it together. But a few months ago, things went sideways. At night, her mind would cloud over, and she'd stuff her face with whatever she could find, then puke it all up back in her room. That was the only way she could keep going. And over time, the amount of food just kept increasing, because Grace was constantly starving. But she'd lose her mind, like an animal, when she crammed food in her mouth. And then she'd throw it all up every time to avoid gaining weight. And now, the princess was asking these maids to help her. Suddenly, giving in to her emotions, Choo-Choo rushed forward to hug Her Highness. She understood that this lady had been through a lot, and that she was going through some really tough times. And Siana, in a pretty calm voice, thanked the princess for telling them the truth. She promised she'd kick this bad habit real soon. First off, to start eating right, Grace needed to ditch the negative vibes she had about food. Siana told her about Tibetan monks who don't eat animals or modified grains. They only eat plants grown in their natural environment. The princess could eat carrots, cabbage, stuff like that, and not gain any weight. But Grace pointed out that elephants only eat veggies too, and they're huge. Siana had to explain that elephants are just naturally like that. They're big, but they don't get all flabby or pack on the pounds. Then, the girl recommended some veggie dishes, even though she knew it'd be tough on the princess. After all, she was deep into her bad habit, but she swore she'd give it her best shot. So we gotta figure out how to keep her from puking. And Siana said exercise after eating might help. This ain't no regular job, like Grace thought at first. Exercise is just how knights train, you know? And honestly, any movement counts as exercise, even just a walk around the block. Thing is, the princess was scared of getting a tan and ruining her pale skin. Siana realized Her Highness wanted to keep that delicate, elegant princess look. But then Choo-Choo suggested working out indoors, and even showed off her own muscles as an example. That freaked Grace out, because she didn't want to end up looking like a bear. Siana calmed her down, explaining that Choo-Choo wouldn't push her too hard, just make sure she moved around more. She also asked if Grace had any problems with her teeth or a sore throat when swallowing, because if she keeps making herself throw up, she'll just wreck her body, and it'll only get worse from there. Her teeth'll start falling out, one after another. Her throat'll get raw, and she won't be able to eat at all. Then it's game over, and Her Highness will just kick the bucket. That argument scared Lady Grace big time. She definitely didn't want to die. After she promised to train with Choo-Choo, the girl dragged some dumbbells into the room and started showing her how to lift and lower this workout gear to build up muscle. Choo-Choo brought the princess the lightest dumbbells, but still doubted she could even lift them. But she was super surprised when Her Highness smoothly copied the exercise she'd been shown. Still, Choo-Choo was worried. Knowing the princess had a fragile skeleton, the kind only a few people have. Then she added that regular exercise would help her build some muscle. Grace panicked and dropped the dumbbell, almost twisting her wrist. But she reminded me she wants to eat right, but is totally against turning into a she-bear like the maid. Then, Choo-Choo brought her an omelet with veggies, like Siana recommended. And Her Highness didn't just scarf that thing down, she straight up licked the plate clean. She thought it was all super tasty, and she felt satisfied. But her face immediately twisted in horror, and she felt like puking before she started getting fat. Still, she remembered Siana's advice and started to hold back. After a while, Siana learned that the princess was doing well, and even upped her training sessions. Now she was happy for Grace, realizing she had worried for nothing. Siana had her own physical labor. Now she had to move sacks. She'd hoped becoming a maid would make her stronger, but realized her strength has its limits too. Another sack, and she almost ate it, tripped right up. Then Rashid caught her. He popped up out of nowhere, like a jack-in-the-box, but said he was just checking on the warehouse. Then he admitted he was messing with her, and he really wanted to see Siana. Ever since their last run-in, when he said she was playing him like a fiddle and she kissed him, she bolted. He thought it was flirting, but she just wasn't tracking his train of thought. And while she was blushing again, Rashid just thought she was freaking adorable. His Highness was suddenly dying to pull her close and just hold her. But seeing her practically having a meltdown, he figured it wasn't gonna happen, and not here anyway. Noticing Siana still had work to do, Rashid offered to help, and she took him up on it. Together, they finished up pretty quick, and she thanked him for the assist. And then it hit her again. How handsome he was, and still not corrupted by power. Plus, he was turning out to be super caring, which you wouldn't guess at first glance. She was so lost in thought, she poked his muscles without even realizing it, and Rashid was like, "What are you doing?" Realizing what she'd done, Siana freaked out and started apologizing like crazy. But His Highness totally got that she liked his physique and rolled up his sleeve to flex for her. And for a few moments, Siana just stared at his biceps, completely hypnotized, like she was jealous. If she had even half that muscle, her job would be way easier. That's when the prince pictured her with ripped muscles, even though he'd still think she was cute that way. But he mostly liked that she was so petite, easy to hold in his arms. That made Siana blush and turn away, and Rashid just went back to daydreaming. He wanted her closer, and he was sure it would happen, just didn't know when. Soon, Sian heard that Princess Grace's condition was even better. When the maid checked on Her Highness, she saw with her own eyes that she looked even more beautiful. Her complexion had improved, her hair was shiny, and her eyes were full of life. But more importantly, the princess was much calmer, and she was throwing up less often. Grace admitted that she even liked exercising, especially since it didn't make her gain weight. And Choo-Choo was thrilled that Her Highness was doing so well with the exercises. Xian was just glad that the princess was doing well, and that she was full of energy. And she wasn't even embarrassed when Choo-Choo compared her to world-class athletes. And to show what results she'd achieved, she lifted a table, demonstrating her physical strength. Just then, they heard someone coming in, and Choo-Choo barely managed to yank the table away from the princess before anyone saw it. The maid who walked in announced that Isaac was there to see Her Highness. Then, he himself walked in. His face was dead serious, and he carried himself with complete confidence. Grace thanked Choo-Choo for her work and asked her to leave them alone. She didn't waste any time, only promising to make tea for Her Highness and her guest. Isaac commented that the princess seemed to have a good relationship with her maid, but he told her not to forget her position and to be careful not to be swayed by others. He also expressed his concerns, mentioning that Her Highness didn't look quite like herself. After all, she's his fiancée, and he didn't expect her to greet him looking so disheveled. A princess should always look perfect, though Grace didn't see anything wrong with how she looked. They're engaged. Plus, she told him he can come over whenever he wants. Isaac, realizing he embarrassed Her Highness, explained he came because he missed her. Also, he heard from Empress Layla that Grace hadn't left her room in ages, and he got worried. But she couldn't tell him she was just trying to kick her bad habits. Still, she was happy her fiancé was worried about her and assured him she was totally fine. Isaac also heard the princess was eating more, so she didn't look so run down. But her baggy, rumpled dress told him she'd been lying in bed all day. The guy was worried she'd go back to her old self, and Grace shuddered at the thought. To cover, she claimed she was only eating vegetables and working out. That's how she's controlling her weight and overall feeling way better. Isaac was surprised to hear his fiancé was working out, since that's usually night stuff. He even tried to talk her out of it, saying he really liked the way she looked now. He wanted her to be delicate and elegant, and suggested she eat less to keep the weight off. Later, Choo-Choo brought the princess a salad dinner, but made it filling enough to actually satisfy her. But Grace wouldn't even let her in, declaring she wasn't gonna eat it. She even yelled at the maid when she begged her to at least try a bite. Her Highness decided to keep on living the same old way, 'cause she thought it was the only way to be loved. She didn't even care that this puking habit could actually kill her. It was better than being disgusting in Isaac's eyes, as far as she was concerned. Realizing she couldn't handle it alone, Choo-Choo called Siana for help, who was asking for permission to come in. But now the princess wasn't even responding, and the maids were starting to freak out, thinking she might have passed out. So Siana just opened the door and went in to see what was going on. Grace was kneeling on the floor, looking like a thundercloud, chanting that she wasn't going to eat. And even if she did eat something, 'cause she was starving, she'd just puke it right back up. Even then, she was scared that something might still stay in her stomach. Seeing Her Highness like that, Choo-Choo got super scared for her and rushed over, covering her with a blanket. She begged her to stop, but the princess just got angrier and shoved the maid away. Her Highness was terrified of getting chubby again, like she used to be. And if that happened, Isaac would break off their engagement and marry that little twerp, Julia. If Grace got fat, even the maids would hate her again and start spreading rumors about her. The princess thinks she's the prettiest in the palace, but she'll be useless if she gets fat. Then she just started bawling, and the maids waited a few minutes, knowing the tears would bring some relief. And then Siana pitched another idea and explained it, that the only person Her Highness should worry about is herself, and she shouldn't think about those who don't even love her. For a second, Her Highness seemed interested in the suggestion, but then sadness took over again, and the tears flowed even harder. To comfort the poor thing, the maids hugged her, because hugs usually help ease suffering. Later, when Grace calmed down a bit, Sienna told her not to worry, and nobody would find out about today. At that moment, Sienna seemed like a high-ranking maid who'd served the royal family for a long time. The princess even figured Sienna had faced a similar problem because she understood her so well. Then she asked me to tell my story. Grace was curious how Sienna managed to get out of it. And in a slightly sad voice, she said that she had a similar story and that she desperately wanted love. But when she stopped trying to beat her eating disorder, everyone started hating her and ditched her. Even her parents doubted they could marry her off looking like that. And then she realized it was a poison eating her from the inside, and the little doll she used to be vanished. Sienna explained that it's not worth torturing yourself just to please others. A princess can live the way she wants, especially since she has so much power. Because Grace is the daughter of the empress and emperor of this country. She can eat whatever she wants and wear whatever dresses she likes, and anyone who doesn't like it can just shove it. And if Grace has found someone she cares about, she should try to get closer to him. It doesn't have to be Isaac, right? There's no law saying you have to marry him. Sienna made saying crazy crap like that sound so damn easy. But it helped calm her highness down, and then Sienna was about to bounce. That's when Choo-Choo, quick on her feet, shoved a dish she'd made right under the princess's nose. She apologized like, "Oh, bad timing," and acted like she was gonna split, leaving her highness alone with the food. Choo-Choo just added that if the lady wasn't hungry, she'd happily eat it all herself. Or if not, she could show her another easy exercise to drop the weight fast. And that's when Grace realized that instead of obsessing over losing weight, she wanted to get stronger. The next morning, the maids were running around the palace like chickens with their heads cut off. They were cooking tons of food for Princess Grace, and they were shocked at how much she could put away. Once she'd finally satisfied her appetite, she kicked her feet up on the table, crossed them. Stretching out, she was just stoked to finally eat in peace, as much as she damn well pleased. All that was left was to pick the leftovers out of her teeth with a toothpick, which just made people think she was even weirder. After chilling for 5 minutes, Grace ordered the head maid to bring her dessert. The maid dared to suggest the lady would get fat again, but the princess twisted her words around, so she ended up being the one in the wrong. The maid swore she only wanted her highness's happiness and obediently went to fetch the dessert. Choo-Choo decided to stir the pot, hinting that even a dog gets left alone while eating, but this one dared to contradict the princess. After Grace had her fill of the sweet stuff, it was time to get to work. She could lift a seriously heavy weight, and her muscles had gotten so big, even she loved it. Just then, Isaac burst in, screaming hysterically that the princess was going to ruin her figure. Grace then bragged that she was getting stronger thanks to a training device Choo-Choo made for her, and she was proud she liked it. Plus, she hated wearing makeup anyway. A freaked-out Isaac started begging her to reconsider. He even got down on one knee, explaining that it was wrong. But this time, the princess just got pissed, and she started chewing him out for daring to scold the daughter of the most respected people in the country, the rulers of the empire. That kind of thing usually gets you punished, and Isaac realized he'd gone too far, but he just stayed kneeling there, watching Grace's sweet face fill with rage. She yanked her hand away from him in disgust because he dared to make fun of her. Now the guy realized he'd screwed up and started apologizing. He was probably afraid his bride wouldn't be the most beautiful flower in the empire. But no matter how he tried to weasel his way out, Her Highness wasn't buying a single word. She slapped him so hard, even Choo-Choo got spooked. The princess then sneered, saying the young earl had such dainty little arms, and now she knew why. He might be a nobleman who loves the cushy life, but you can't call him a strong man with those noodle arms. Lady Grace finished by telling him to hit the gym for once. Later, His Highness Rashid showed up at Sienna's workplace again. She asked what was up this time, and it turned out he just wanted a drink. Before that, he dropped by, 'cause he was craving fruit. Then he came to check out the menu. And another time, he showed up to grab some pet food. Sienna was worried that Rashid was going to cause trouble for her, maybe even a scandal. That's when her relatively chill life as a maid bites the dust. Like he was reading her mind, Rashid swore that as a prince of this empire, he could smooth over any bumps in the road. Seriously, he's been popping into Sienna's storage room so much, and the other maids haven't dared to say a peep. Feeling a bit calmer, the girl asked what kind of drink the prince would like. Rashid just sneezed in response, and Siana realized his throat was probably just dry. But then she noticed he was a little flushed, and after feeling his forehead, she figured out His Highness had caught a cold. She started scolding him, telling him not to screw around and to get his butt back to bed and get some rest. Rashid couldn't rest. He'd lived on the battlefield since he was 13, and he'd been wounded, even broken bones before. There was even a time he got hit with a poisoned arrow, messed up his insides, and almost died. Compared to that, he didn't see anything scary about a cold, saying it was just like a leaf brushed past him. Siana was against it though, saying the leaf could be poisoned and put him in danger. Even if everything seemed fine, she urged him to be careful so complications wouldn't arise. After that, Siana suggested taking him to the palace and starting treatment. Later, the girl helped His Highness into bed, and then she got ready to leave. But then Rashid grabbed her apron and said his throat was getting tighter and his temperature was rising. The girl didn't get why he wouldn't ask the other servants for help, but she couldn't leave him like that either. Then she made him milk with honey and ginger. After just 1 cup, His Highness should feel a lot better. Rashid took a sip, then complimented the maid, saying that everything she made was delicious. Siana was a little bewildered, not understanding how someone who'd spent so much time on the battlefield could say something like that. Then she straight up told him she thought he was a weird dude. His Highness just twisted her words around like she was into strange guys, which totally flustered her, and she started scrambling for something to say. Rashid just took it as a win, like he was her type, according to her own words. Siana thought it was total nonsense, like he was delirious from the fever. She went to tuck him in tighter, and that's when he said he really liked her taking care of him. She didn't want to hang around him for long and asked him to give the job to someone else. Back at her post, Siana thanked the maids for their hard work. Today was her last day at this gig. The maids were happy with her too, and as a thank you, they had a little gift for her. They made her a necklace of acorns and nuts, so now she can grab a snack while she works. Then Siana spotted Jean, who was quiet as a mouse all of a sudden. She called her over to say goodbye too, but just for now, since they'd see each other soon. The 3 maids saw Siana off, heads bowed with respect and obedience. And once she stepped across the threshold, she could proudly say she was now a mid-level maid. Of course, Siana went right back to the Ruby Palace, missing Eris, and noticed she looked great. Guess the Empress had been taking good care of her this whole time. She got curious how the little one managed the Empress, and asked her to spill all the details. The little princess tilted her head, a little embarrassed, saying that Grandma must like her, because even when she was clanging dishes and smacking her lips while eating, the Empress wasn't even giving her notes, just watching her and tossing out compliments now and then. Even when Eris threw tantrums, the Empress never once lost her cool. The kid figured her grandma was just missing her own granddaughter a lot, so she was being extra nice. Goldria even gave her these old dresses, which the little one thought were totally tasteless. The twin maids were getting all worked up about how much the little princess had been through. They even started sniffling when they heard she'd missed them a ton. Then the twins started quietly bickering about who'd get to take care of Her Highness first. That just made the princess think they were even weirder, even though they'd gotten promoted. After a while, a royal carriage pulled up to the Ruby Palace. When little Eris saw who climbed out, she started complaining, not wanting to see those guests. That was Princess Grace, and she wasn't here to see Eris, but Siana. Plus, she got a whole new hairstyle. She wanted to show it off to the maid and, just chat about old times. Thing is, Eris hated it when other people hung out with her maids, so she demanded Grace leave. Even though her face was twisted up with anger, Grace still thought she was cute. Just then, Siana showed up and, seeing Her Highness, asked what brought her here. But then she spotted Choo-Choo sniffling behind the princess and got a little worried. Turns out, the powerhouse just really missed Siana and even apologized to Oris for the surprise visit. The little princess couldn't believe that's the only reason the maid came all the way here with Her Highness. At that, Choo-Choo decided to take her leave, so she wouldn't interrupt the sisters' chat. Siana agreed that it wasn't cool to just barge in like that, especially to ruin the master's mood with tears. She was just putting on a show, pretending to give her friend a serious dressing down. It worked, and Grace jumped in, saying she was super happy to see her sister, which is why she came to visit. Then the princesses agreed to have some tea, after which each one hoped they could bail as soon as possible. The emperor's daughters settled in a gazebo where the sun wasn't blazing, even though Grace wasn't as scared of getting a tan anymore. Meanwhile, Choo-Choo was asking Sienna why the princesses were suddenly acting so nice. Already drinking tea, Grace knew she had to start the conversation and asked if Aris already had a fiancé. She explained she wasn't trying to give any advice and admitted she was a little jealous of the kid, but she asked her to postpone the engagement as much as possible, or even better, not do it at all. Because as she gets older, she'll see her partner in a totally different light, not the way it was in the beginning. The girl realized something must have happened with Grace's fiancé, and Grace confessed that she felt uneasy around him. A princess is supposed to be composed, keep up appearances, and speak in a gentle voice, right? No matter what, she has to stay elegant and chill, and absolutely no cussing. Then, like they'd planned it, both princesses announced that if a guy's making demands, you better follow them too. Choo-Choo was a little surprised to see the sisters getting along so well. While the imperial daughters were chatting, another guest showed up. Empress Angela came with her son, but seeing Eris was busy, she decided to come back later. Good Eyes, though, noticed the boy was giving her a weird look. They explained he wanted to draw her, and the princess agreed. Iris was also itching to watch her little brother work, and the boy's mom noticed things were starting to repeat themselves. Something similar happened last time, too. Meanwhile, Prince Rashid got a letter from his folks saying they're gonna stay at the spa longer, which meant His Highness was stuck organizing the rose banquet all by himself, and it was coming up fast. It's this yearly thing, and the big rule is everyone's gotta show up with a date. And that rule definitely applied to the guy running the whole show. That's when Sol freaked out, realizing His Highness still didn't have a fiancé. But he suggested Rashid take this chance to find a lady who could eventually become his wife. This girl also needed to understand the prince's personality, but he wasn't feeling it at all. For some reason, he just wasn't into girls, which started all sorts of scandalous rumors about him. The truth was, Rashid was only interested in animals. He even thought about bringing one as his date to the banquet. And he thought that was kinda cute. The guard was at his wit's end, terrified His Highness would die an old bachelor. But then he remembered there was one woman in the kingdom who really caught the prince's eye. So, he boldly suggested Lady Sienna as a partner for the rose banquet. Rashid was all for it, but he seriously doubted she'd agree. The guard decided to handle that himself and headed to Sienna's place with gifts. But just like His Highness suspected, the maid turned him down flat. She explained it wasn't the presents, it was her position that was the problem. Even for one day, a regular maid would get slammed for even standing next to His Highness. Nasty rumors would start, and Sienna's peaceful life would be over. And she was right. Sewell even started kicking himself for not thinking about it. He just wanted her by the prince's side, not those other fake ladies. Sure, Rashid's got chicks throwing themselves at him, but he's not interested. His Highness only wants to see Sienna, the maid. But now he's got to hit that banquet solo, 'cause she turned him down. Sienna knew Rashid loved her like a little pet, but that's no reason to say yes. She told Sol she was sorry when he suddenly announced he'd have to be the prince's date. Of course, there'll be a ton of nasty rumors after that, but Sol's used to it. And his mom will be crying her eyes out, but the guard's got no choice. Sienna knew exactly how this could play out and agreed to go with His Highness. But she's got one major condition. Sol cut her off, promising she could have anything, even 10 times more than she asked for. But she just wanted to keep her peaceful life as a maid, so she asked him not to reveal her identity. That might be a little tricky, seeing as how a lot of people in the palace already know her face. Sienna told the guard not to sweat it. She'd take care of her appearance herself. For Sol, the main thing was setting up a fake identity for her. After a while, Sienna headed to the imperial palace. And the second Rasil saw her, he was practically jumping for joy, like a little kid. Plus, he was super stoked she'd accepted the offer. But she didn't get why he hadn't asked her himself. It's like his ego was too fragile to have a noble prince asking a maid for a favor. Rashid explained that a request from him might seem like an order, so he was worried. He finally realized sending someone else would have been a total cop-out. Then Rashid dropped to one knee and kissed Sienna's hand, which totally stunned her. Pressing his cheek against her hand, the prince thanked her for agreeing to his tough request. Sienna, kinda charmed by his face at that moment, asked him to fill her in on the details of the banquet. It's an event celebrating the goddess of roses and love, so having a partner is a must. Plus, the organizer has to do the opening dance, no exceptions. His Highness noticed Sienna was listening way too seriously, and figured she didn't believe in love. The girl thought love was super rare, like a miracle, especially in royal families. So, yeah, this whole kind of event is a little shocking to her. She thought they just had to make an appearance at the start, but the prince told her not to worry or stress about it. But then Siana just announced she was going to go all out since she agreed to come. She even asked Rashid to practice dancing with her right then and there. Meanwhile, somewhere else, a carriage carrying other banquet attendees was heading down a forest road. This red-haired dude, Kiran, was holding a locket with Siana's photo inside, and his sister, Carolina, was telling him to ditch that thing and forget about the girl. Everyone figured Princess Siana died the day the kingdom of Aslan fell, but Kiran wasn't buying it. They never found her body, so she's definitely alive, just somewhere else. The redhead woman knew the kid had a serious thing for that princess, but the reason they came here was to strengthen ties with the imperial family, and she wasn't going to stand by if Kiran's love life started messing things up. The guy told his mom not to worry, swearing he hadn't lost it enough to do anything stupid. Calming down, the woman promised to help him out once she finished her own chores. Kiran himself never stopped believing he'd find Siana, no matter what. And when he did find her, he'd never let go of her hand again. Meanwhile, Rashid noticed the maid was dancing unbelievably well, really feeling the beat. The girl mentioned she used to be a princess, but never thought that skill would come in handy. As for the prince, it seemed like he was dancing for the first time. His Highness really hadn't learned to dance, or rather, he hadn't had time for that kind of stuff. Back then, there was a war going on, and Rashid didn't have the chance. Siana couldn't even believe that the most powerful heir to the imperial throne, dude picked a seriously tough road to become prince. She couldn't figure out why His Highness was even going through all this. But hey, it wasn't the only weird thing. Then, all of a sudden, Siana, after apologizing for being blunt, straight up asked Rashid why he still didn't have a fiancé. Just like the rumors said, the prince declared he wasn't into girls, but he saw something special in Siana. That kinda shocked the maid, and Rashid gently touched her face, fixing a strand of her hair. Siana's face reminded him of a white bun with 3 round beans. It made her look super cute. Now she was even regretting asking that kind of question in the first place, and she just asked to keep practicing the dance, noting that Rashid was a quick learner. Later, Siana told Aris that she'd be her brother's partner at the banquet and hoped she'd take it okay. But the princess was obviously jealous of the maid, who apparently has a thing for someone else in the royal family, and she declared she wasn't just going to sit back and watch. To that end, the princess planned to make sure Siana reeked of her scent from a mile away. So, on Her Highness's orders, the twins grabbed the maid by the arms and dragged her to the bathroom, where they rubbed her down with the same oils Princess Aris uses. The little princess also didn't want her maid looking like a slob at the banquet. She wanted Siana to be the most beautiful one there. Actually, Siana was planning on dressing herself. They even gave her money for it. And now she had to repay His Highness for his generosity and really put in the effort. Siana didn't fight the prep, but she did ask them to get lavender oil ready for her next bath. She also requested a different conditioner for her hair, so it wouldn't get so tangled. Siana seemed a little sus to the princess because of that. But that's exactly why she liked her, so Aris gave the maid everything she asked for. The next time Siana met the prince, he couldn't stop staring at her. She even wondered if she had something on her face. But Rashid just noticed something was different about her. He was actually making progress with his dancing too, which kind of surprised him. But he knew he'd learned to dance well thanks to Siana, and he was grateful for it. She caught that weird look on his face again, and he was way too close. Then she confessed that she couldn't make it to rehearsal tomorrow because she had to pick out a dress and jewelry for the banquet. And since she's trying to keep her identity secret, she needs to be totally prepared. Plus, Rashid can't go dress shopping with her, because it'll be obvious she's his partner. No way you can hide Rashid's face like last time, because this ain't no peasant festival. We could run into a whole crowd of noble ladies out shopping for the banquet. Completely hiding his identity is going to be impossible anyway, and Siana didn't even want to pick out a dress with him. After explaining all that, the maid was about to head out. But the prince stopped her, and as soon as she turned around, he shoved a candy in her mouth. It was a chocolate candy with raspberry filling, and she thought it tasted incredible. Still, she asked him to be a little more polite and give them to her wrapped next time. Rashid just gave her a sweet smile, but promised to grant her request. Watching her walk away, the prince noticed how small she was. but she had these quick, cute little steps. Standing there like that, the maid reminded Rashid of a chipmunk. This bloodthirsty prince sure knows how to lay on the charm when he talks to people. But it's all an act. Rashid's ice cold. There's not a human bone in his body. The prince could chop off some random dude's head without